Well, it's a Two Ordinary Cops International Edition, Schultze.
It is, mate. Yes, they actually let me back into. Well, they let me into New Zealand. I thought I might have a bit of problems especially coming into the country after.
Well, I gave them a tip off, and it turns out their intel wasn't real good.
Yeah, well, I think the funniest one is Miriam. Miriam was the only one that got searched when we went through the checkpoint, and I said, "Oh, I probably shouldn't have mentioned you had cocaine on you. I don't know. It just."
Yes, no, no. Not a good practical joke on the missus, mate. No
No.
good. Yeah. So you're in the shaky isle of Christchurch, mate.
I am, mate. Yeah, yeah, and let me tell you, mate, I am enjoying the weather over here. I think it's a top of 21 today. I went for a walk yesterday afternoon. It's nice to go and not actually sweat your ass off. Yeah, I went for about a 7K walk yesterday afternoon. Absolutely beautiful, and it's flat. Not like that Indooroopilly, mate, where you got more hills.
Yeah.
Just about anywhere else in the country. So yeah, no, really, really enjoying it, and the Kiwi hospitality, of course.
Very good, mate. Very good. Any shout outs, mate?
Oh, yes, mate, we do. So we've got a Dan Burgess. He's contacted us from Dunedin, actually, a few hours drive south. Well, depending on who's driving, I suppose. But yeah, from here in Christchurch. And mate, he's asked, and I thought this was a cracker. We had a bit of a quick yarn about this yesterday before when we were talking about what we're going to talk about this week. And he's asked if we've ever had to basically call ourselves on duty and flash our badge. And I've just thought straight away, and you straight away have gone, oh, yeah, have we got a tale or two about that?
Oh, yeah. Just bloody hoops. Yeah. Well, I think before we go on, I've just got a quick one because we're going to talk about that today. So
Yep.
before we go on, I was at a car crash the other day with the RFS and a couple of Grafton coppers there. And I just got yarning as we do because it was fairly settled. There was no one hurt or anything. And anyway, I just made mention that I did the podcast and he'd heard of it. He hadn't listened to it himself, but he'd heard of it. So I think his name was Ben as well. I can't remember exactly. We just said good day quickly, but
Yep.
yeah, shout out to those guys. And apparently, yeah, they've heard around Grafton Station that of the podcast, so that's good. And they were doing it tough, mate. It seems universal. At that point, they were the only crew on duty for the entire Grafton area. The other guys had been sent. There'd been some major incident up near Lismore, so a heap of units had gone north from Grafton, and they were it. And they were out in the hills with us. So Grafton was policeless.
Wow.
So yeah. So anyway, that's it just is what it is, mate. There's a demand for services, and it's a pretty rough old time. But anyway, yeah, shout out to the Grafton crew. Yeah, they do it pretty hard down there. It's got its moments, old Grafton town.
Well, mate, I bet, and also, I mean, I know the big thing, especially here. I think actually our police associations. I did see Queensland and Northern Territory. There, it's all about police retention. So we can keep people in the job, and also all the domestics they're attending takes a lot of resources away. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah, so. So a shout out to anybody that's doing this tough. You and I have both been there, but I think they're just having trouble with numbers at the moment, and of course the demand goes higher. If you have 10 more people call 000, of course suddenly you just don't have resources. So it's as simple as that. You get more people talking or calling in for domestics, because of domestic violence awareness, which is really good. However, it does raise then the resources. So you've just got to have the people to cope with that.
yeah, it's complex.
It
But
is.
enough on duty conversation. What
Yeah.
about off duty conversation? So, if
Well,
you like, I can sort of run it down before we start telling stories. I'll sort of give
okay.
a rundown for those who don't sort of get it. I mean, coppers would get it, and most people can understand that you can do what's called call yourself on duty. So, we're trained that you're a sworn police officer, regardless whether you're on shift or not. It's you have the appointment, and when your work is purely based on how you get paid pretty well. So, you do have the ability to call yourself on duty in the Northern Territory. There is a law called Fail to Rescue, and that's more to do with assisting people in need. So if you're physically and mentally capable of assisting somebody in an emergency, you're actually required to do so by law, and that is fairly unique to the NT. I know that I train first aid down here, but we don't just train New South Wales; we train other places too. and we touch on legislation around first aid. And one of the things they get tested on is, do you have to help somebody if you come across them? And the answer in most places is no. You're under no obligation to engage and to help people, but not so in the Northern Territory. If you're physically able and mentally able and you've got the skills and you don't actually assist somebody, it's called fail or rescue. So
Yep.
that's more the first aid side of things. It's more to do with a person in medical crisis or in a car crash, just offering assistance to someone like that. You wouldn't be expected to put yourself at risk in a situation where, there's criminality or something similar. However, Schiltzy, on more than one occasion, where we're required to call ourselves on duty. Now,
Yep.
I'll preface this by saying I've already mentioned in one of the episodes previously that we don't flash Freddy. Well, that's more to do with if you're out on the town having a beer, you're not going to flash Freddy for a minor incident or for something that can be dealt with by the on-duty uniform police or the bouncers or whatever else. You're just going to be an embuggerance because you're probably drunk. Your judgment's probably not perfect. And at the end of the day, like, there are on-duty police to deal with that stuff. You don't really need a drunken off-duty copper slobbering around the place. So
Yep.
that's what we were talking about there. But there are many times when police have had to call themselves on duty when they're not on duty. So do you want to start it, mate? You want to go back to and find a story for us?
Well, mate, yeah, I will start with one. Funnily enough, when you and I were both talking about this, we have got a couple where both of us were there. But I'll let you tell one of them. But I'll start off with one. It would have been early on. I can't exactly remember what year, but I was definitely working in Catherine, and I was starting shift at 7 o'clock, and I had to shoot down to Woolies at about 5 in the afternoon or something. And anyway, I was driving. I was driving down into Catherine, and which is the main street. Where it's Stewart Highway. It's basically the one that runs all the way, from Darwin down into South Australia. So I'm just coming in, and it's just about where it goes from 80 to 60, and then. Mate, there's this guy that's just wandered out on the middle of the road. I'm just in my Holden Rodeo, and he's wandered out in the middle of the Rodeo just trying to kill himself, like throwing himself in front of cars. So, of course, I've stopped in front of him, and I'll put my hazard lights on. And anyway, I've seen him. He's completely intoxicated. He's just gone off his head. More probably wandering around in the road, but then he thought he'd just lie down on the middle of the road. And of course, I assessed him. I'm going, "Oh no, you're drunk, mate. I think you can." So I basically said, "Mate, I'm a police officer. You can come." And he stood up, and I've got a hold of him, and I've just got my mobile phone out to call the cops to come down and grab him, and he's done the bolt. He's just run away from me, and one thing I realised, when you don't have those accoutrements on, how lighter are you?
Yeah,
Holy shit, you can actually run. Um, so I've left my car in the middle of the highway with the hazard lights going, and I've chased him for about 200 meters, and that's all it took me to catch him. He was indigenous, so he's naturally quick, but obviously I wasn't too bad at that time of my life, and yeah, so I caught up with him, and he was obviously quite drunk as well, so it wasn't all me. And yeah, so I caught up with him and tackled him to the ground, and then I heard the actually license sirens. They came screaming down to help out, and take him in for the night for his embuggerance, I suppose, on the community as he was trying to hold up traffic on the Stewart Highway. So, and all those things can just happen right in front of you. But mate, what stories have you got?
oh mate, there's quite a few, but I think I'll start small and we'll build up to the wild
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So another night, this was Catherine, probably very similar time to that story. You and I, and this goes against what I've said. We'd been out having a few drinks. We weren't drunk though. We were sort of about 10 o'clock at night. And we're heading home,
yep,
and we were just walking down to get a cab out the front of Catherine Hotel, and we'd been at the little bar out the side. And anyway, came out, and I can't remember exactly. I remember there was a fight, and it was two blokes were outnumbering one bloke, and they didn't seem to know each other, and it almost like these two fellas had just picked this bloke.
yep,
Anyway, we ran over, and I remember we both reacted at the same time. We didn't sort of think about it; we just reacted, and we ran over and pushed these blokes off. And I think we're at that stage of being used to being in uniform, and we're going, "Stop, police, move back!" And these blokes have looked up and just gone, "Oh, well, we're in a fight with more people." And they sort of were a bit hesitant then because then it was 3 versus 2 as opposed to 2-on-1. And I remember we were telling them legal things like you're under arrest, blah, blah, all this sort of stuff. And the poor bugger on the ground was pretty bashed up. And anyway, there'd been a bit of a group out, including a couple of fireys that night. Our mate Crystal, he was out and just down the road. And I grabbed hold of one of these fellas and he was pulling away from me trying to get away. So I did what's called just a single arm bar takedown. So you basically pull their arm out beside them, pull them off balance, put your your outside forearm into their tricep, and you basically helicopter them into the ground.
Yep.
Well, I've done that. It's a train. It was a trained move back then. So I've just done that instinctively because that's you're trained to do it and you do it quite a bit. And this fella's gone face first, and the other bloke saw what happened to him, and he sort of gave up, and you had him as well.
Yep.
And I remember a police car was sort of in the area, and they responded straight away, and these two were arrested, and they dealt with it. But we'd called ourselves on duty. I think we stood up and went, "Oh shit, we probably should just." And they've gone, "Oh, you're gonna have to do statements." It's like, "Yeah, no, we'll do a statement, no worries." So I think what happened was we ended up down at the station doing a statement from memory. I can't remember exactly, but it was just, it went from all cheering and laughing and carrying on inside the pub, walking outside, to a couple of quick takedowns and just a rapid arrest and down to the station for a quick statement. And I think that was bedtime after that. So it's funny how it can happen quickly and how sometimes you can react. And admittedly, we were fairly junior then. I think we were sort of relatively experienced probationary constables, if there's such a thing. So we sort of were confident enough to not overstep the bounds. And I think we still just reacted instinctively. Whereas I think when you get a bit older, you sort of do a bit of a dynamic risk assessment in your head. I don't think we did one. I think we just jumped in. So
you're probably right there. Yeah, you tend to hold back probably a little bit more, and risk assess. But mind you, I think considering the circumstances, we probably handled it pretty well. Now, mate, are we going to tell the other one about in Catherine Terrace?
Well, this was a few years later. Do you want me to tell it, or do you want to tell it?
No, mate, you tell it. But you've just got to mention when the woman said somebody's been hit. And,
No, that's right. So we're having dinner at the coffee club. It was, the little restaurant next to the Catherine Hotel in the main street in Catherine Terrace. It was only early, probably 7:00 at night.
Yeah,
and it was you and me and my wife and a couple other people there. And anyway, we're having a good night, and our dinner was on its way. Like, it hadn't turned up yet. And because it's a small town, everyone knows who you are, sort of thing. And just, "Hey, boys, how are you?" And no dramas. And anyway, one of the waitresses ran over to our table and she goes, "Someone's just been hit outside." And my wife, being at this stage quite an experienced police wife, has gone, "Well, call the police." And anyway, she goes, "Oh, yeah, but he's still in the road." And then we've both reacted and you go, "Oh, hit by a car."
Yeah.
So it wasn't hit. So the thing is, people getting hit in Catherine happens every 20 seconds, especially at night time.
Yeah.
A bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. And hit, punched, assaulted.
That was Damo.
It was Ema. She's gone, "We'll someone's been hit, call the police." And then straight away it was, hit by a car.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've had a bloody pedestrian's been hit by a vehicle outside the coffee club. So you and I went outside, and we had to keep our wits about us because it was dark. I mean, it was in the main street. There's street lights around, and it's only sort of a 40 zone through there. But anyway, we get over there, and a fella had been hit by a car. He was injured. He was on the ground. He wasn't deceased or anything, but he was on the ground and quite badly injured. And I think there were plenty of people around on the phone, but the biggest thing we needed to do was slow traffic down. So from memory, I think you and the ambulance was there pretty quickly from memory. So they sort of needed to be protected, but they had big flashing red and blues on, so they were very visible anyway. And I think from memory, we went further out towards the police station, so just out further south, basically, just to make sure vehicles were slowing down before they got to the ambulance. And that was our little job there. After we'd assessed him and sort of made sure that other people were calling 000, we realised that he was conscious, breathing. He just had injuries. And, so we've gone from that. Anyway, we were probably out there for about 20 minutes or so. And then the actual police turned up, and the ambos were, obviously there, and they took over the situation. And we sort of gave the guys a rundown. No, we didn't see what happened, but we were in the coffee club. And I'll never forget, because our dinners had turned up. So we went back to the coffee club.
Yep.
And the manager had come over to our table. He said, "Oh, boys, we'll get you some new meals. These are cold, and everything's on the house."
Yep.
So which is very generous of him. He didn't have to do that. So Yeah, so we ended up with a free feed. I don't think we got free booze. I think we got a free feed out of it.
Yeah, well, mate, they already knew our drinking ability, so
Yeah.
probably probably pretty smart, mate.
Yeah.
I remember instinctively that night because we've gone out, like you said, mate. It's dark, and we were just in our normal casual clothes and all that sort of thing. But I remember pulling the badge out, and it's the way, and I've spoken about this another time as well. We we walked towards cars with a purpose and stopped them before they could actually get to him. And I remember people just complied. Like
Yeah.
even without your uniform on, if you do the stance and you act in a professional manner as a police officer and, basically command the scene, and we were a lot more experienced by this stage, so, and people just listen and they were completely fine. Oh no, we got to divert you over to this, lane and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, people were good, but I still remember like people going, wow, like, people actually stop for you, even though you're in plain clothes and all that sort of thing. But
And
we are.
not just plain clothes, mate. We were in like board shorts,
Yeah,
t-shirts, and
sorry.
thongs.
Yeah.
Like, but you're right. You just get used to holding yourself a certain way, and I think people just realise that it's an off-duty situation, but they're clearly coppers. That, and I mean, Catherine, they probably recognised us too.
Probably, yeah,
So
yeah. So, but yeah, mate, I still remember your reply because she's come over and said somebody's been hit, and you've gone. Somebody gets hit every like 5 seconds in Catherine.
yeah, it's right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, mate. But that's no, yeah, that's a really good one. I've mentioned. So I've mentioned that one where I was with my ex-wife, and another episode where I saw a guy, beating up a woman on the ground that was on the back of Railway Terrace when you're going back behind BP there. But mate, and that one was probably a bit more volatile because there was a lot more people around. However, what was that back road that used to go, from Woolworths, and we could, like, when you used to go to Catherine East, or where we lived. Um,
Oh, yeah. It starts with C. I can't remember, but yeah, that there's a drive out the back.
yeah,
Yeah, I know the one.
it goes, yeah, it's kind of out of the way. It's a little bit out of town. You'd only get people walking along there if they're going to go to Catherine East.
Yeah,
It's you don't get a lot of foot traffic. But anyway, it was just going on dark, and I wasn't working that day, and I was just driving home, probably from going to Woolworths again, something like that. And as I was walking, and there was a husband and wife. They're both Indigenous, and as I'm as I'm driving, I kind of see her kind of step forward, and he was like reaching for her, and I thought, oh, you know how you catch that out of the corner of your eye? It was just going dark, and I thought, oh, that looks a little bit weird. Anyway, I've gone past him, and no, there hadn't been any contact between the two. But then I thought, oh, I'll just check in my rear vision mirror. By the time as soon as I'd gone past, he'd actually leapt forward and grabbed a hold of her, and I saw him. He was just had her on the ground, just laying into her. So I've stopped and done a U-turn, basically pulled up straight next to him, got out, and called, basically called the police, said, oh, I need you down here now. We've got basically assault. And look, in those sort of cases, it's great because you're the witness. So you're always going to get a conviction for that one. And anyway, and she's straight away, oh, no, he didn't do anything. I said, bullshit, you stay there. And anyway, he's stood up and shaped up to me. And I remember, look, not very professional like, but he's shaped up to me. And I said, mate, honestly, take a swing. Could nothing would be pleasure me more than actually putting your ass on the ground. And I said, sit down. And he kind of saw the dominance of my actions and basically my voice and my verbal commands, and he sat straight down on his ass. He kind of realized he wasn't going to win that one. And yeah,
mm.
came and arrested him. But yeah, I mean, there was nobody else around for that one. It was a husband and wife, and you and I and every other copper knows full well you can actually get both of them turned against you in those sort of
Oh,
circumstances,
yeah, they're
especially when
bloody dangerous. Yeah,
yeah, and when she's sort of obviously, he was laying into her on the ground, and she's turned around saying he didn't do anything. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's just one of those things, mate. But how about another
yeah.
one from?
Chambers Drive is that road?
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know the one. Yeah, it's funny that how um, you sort of don't look later in my career. I didn't really intervene. I mean, you would if there was something going on and you really had to. I've helped out. I did a bit of first aid in Alice on a couple of people. The poor old Alice Springs, as we've spoken about. But you'd see someone on the ground with a bad injury or people gathering around, and you just come over and check them out, and generally call an ambulance and just a lot of first aid was just sit down, just hold it, mate, just hold your shirt on that and stop the bleeding. There's a lot of that goes on,
Yep.
as I've spoken about. But yeah, you and I, mate, in your party town of Tennant Creek. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, mate, and we've mentioned this one when we were talking to Bob Rennie. Who calls Tennant Creek a party town? But I did. Um, at the time, I
I'll
was with.
probably preface it why. Like it was, you know, at that stage, none of us had any kids, and it was still, I was a junior. I was a detective in Tennant. There's three of us there who were detectives, and Tennant Creek was a busy joint, but it's a little place, and there's not a lot of resources. So you are fairly busy, and you do play pretty hard on your days off, and it's a good social spot because there's not a hell of a lot else to do, and there's only a small number of people in those sort of, your tradies and nurses, doctors, teachers, coppers, ambos, everyone, fireys, everyone sort of hangs out together. So as a result, it's a bloody good little social scene in Tennant Creek.
Yep.
And you'd gone through a bit of a breakup, and I remember you had a bit of time off, and you'd said, um, I think we were just yarning. And I said, mate, if you got days off, come down and visit. We'll have a bloody good time down here.
Yep.
And I remember the day you came into town, and do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, mate. Well, and because I think we rocked up most of the time, I would actually leave because I was working out at Ramangini at the time, and so it wasn't a short trip. It was what 700 k's or something, I think, to come down and see you.
Yeah,
Um,
but I think you'd stayed the night in Catherine the night before.
I did. Oh no, what I used to do is leave really early in the morning, so I'll get there like in the afternoon, Friday afternoon, and
Yeah.
and then because that's usually you guys knock off, and then we have a couple of drinks, and I must have got there. I can't remember what time I got there, but we must have met at your place or something, and we decided we need to go and get a carton of grog. Because obviously you were short for some reason. I don't know. You probably drank it all the night before or something. And anyway, down. We're heading down to the bottle, and what do we run into? But a woman with a knife. And you and I have both basically got out and disarmed her. Mate, I can remember. I remember putting something on Facebook, but you might have some more details you remember about it.
Well, yeah, I'll just find that. Yeah, it was down at there's a pub in Big Golden Pub. I can't remember the name. Down in the main street. So we've pulled in there, and I remember looking, and there's this woman. There's obviously
Right?
an issue happening out the front of the pub, and we were just going to go in and buy a carton over the counter. And anyway, I remember looking at it, and I didn't pay a lot of attention because there's a lot of arguments that go on, and I had no interest in intervening. I just wanted to buy a carton of beer and go and sit at the back of our place with you and have a yarn.
Yeah.
So it was about probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think takeaways had just started, so that would be why the pub was empty because the pub normally empties out at about 2 o'clock, and there's a lot of people gather around, get their takeaways, and go from there.
Yep.
So we pulled up out the front, and I see this woman, and I looked in her hand, and I remember seeing the knife in her hand. I thought, mate, she's got a knife. Just careful here. But she
Yep.
wasn't. She was obviously staggering a bit. And I remember we walked up behind her, and you grabbed her from memory. I
Yep.
think you grabbed her, and then I helped, and we sort of snatched we pulled the knife out of her hand, which is not the safest thing in the world to do, but we sort of had the situation under control. But do you want to take it from there, mate?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, because I remember actually grabbing her and basically getting the knife out of her hand, and we had the ability. She didn't because we weren't police. She hadn't really paid much attention to us, so we could actually kind of basically get inside her personal space without being a threat or without being worried about her stabbing us and grabbing hold of her. And mate, you must have actually called the police down there, or they were coming down. They'd heard about it. I think they'd already had a call in relation to the woman with the knife, and
Yeah, I think the manager from the pub had called. She'd been kicked out of the pub and she was cranky and she
that's
was out the
right.
front trying to. I don't, from memory, she wasn't attacking anybody. She was just
No,
threatening everyone with this knife.
yeah,
But I'll never forget, we sort of grabbed her so quickly and threw her on the ground
yeah,
and she
that's
was just stunned. And then all of a sudden she was unarmed and I had the knife and it was like, right, oh, well, this is what's happened.
right.
And
Yeah.
there was pretty good CCTV at the front. So the whole thing was caught on camera from memory.
Yep.
And anyway, the boys turn up and they arrest her and they're like, what did you blokes see? And they just took notes at the time. And I
Yep.
remember we went inside, bought a carton, and we go back out and get in the ute and drive back. And we're like, anyway, Schulte, welcome to Tennant Creek, mate. And I was
Yep.
like, holy Jesus, I love this joint. It's wild. Uh,
Well, mate, exactly. I used to get actually a bit involved in Tennant Creek because I remember you guys because usually I'd go down there for a weekend, and if you guys got called out, a lot of the time you'd actually call me to come in and actually put me on duty, and I'd take statements, and you thought it'd be quite funny when they're reading out the statements why it's taken from the sergeant of Ramangini Police Station.
Well, mate, on more than one occasion, I
Yes.
remember you turned up one afternoon, and there was the old CIB thing was on a Friday afternoon if there's nothing going on. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen anymore. It
No.
was a really good thing because we worked bloody hard like through the week, and if there was a big job on, it was all bets are off. You work till you fall over. But if it was Friday afternoon, lunchtime, and there was nothing going on, quite often, not every week, but a lot of weeks, we would just stand down, go and have lunch at the Memo Club just up the way from. It's only about a 300-meter walk, or not even from the police station,
Yep.
and have a few beers after work, and it was just a good wind down for the week. And that was what you normally arrived to. You'd turn up at about 2, 3 in the
Yes.
afternoon and come and have a beer with us.
Yep.
Well, anyway, I remember you turn up this one day and you're driving into town. And you go, "Righto, mate, are we on?" It's like, "Yeah, we're on, all right. We're still in the office. We've got probably a few more hours to go." And I remember because you knew a lot of the guys at Tenant anyway, so you'd rocked in to the
Yep.
police station and talk about called on duty. Well, this is a whole different story. This isn't reacting to a situation on the road. This is, "Oh, excellent. You can take the statement of this witness."
Yep.
So you've walked in and just gone, "Yeah, what do you need? No worries." And
That's
we're like, "Well, mate, we've got 3 witnesses sitting outside. We're going to take statements from these guys as we go. Do you want to grab one?"
yep.
So I remember you'd walked in there all cheery, thinking you're going straight to a liquid lunch, only to end up taking a statement for Tennant Creek CIB.
Yeah. Getting overtime, mate.
Get all you were. Well, that was the funny thing. Like your overtime cost codes would have been all over the shop. It was like, hang on, why has he got the Barclay Region CIB bloody cost code for this overtime?
Mate, there was 1 or 2 occasions people have commented and reckon I could actually still get on the Costco to the Falconio murder.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but I mean that happened more than once. There's other times there, like you said, over the weekend. If I'd got called in, we might have had a few drinks the night before. It might be like, "Oh, look, there's been not for a major job because then it's just you may as well leave because I'm going to be gone all day."
Yep.
But then it was. I remember a couple of times it's like, "Mate, we've probably got 2 hours work. We just got to square away this and get a file in on this bloke. GD's locked him up last night. We're just going to re-interview the mum. Forensics have got the scene sorted, but there's a couple of other witnesses. Do you mind just taking some statements and then we can knock off?" He's like, "Yep."
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Schiltzy's in there, called out with me. And obviously, this is all approved. We've got onto the OIC and said, "Look, Schiltzy's here. We've got an extra set of hands."
Yep.
And he's like, "Yeah, mate, absolutely. That saves pulling GDs across to do it. So, buddy, if he's happy, pull him in." And
Yeah.
it was never an issue. I remember they were pretty good like that because they realised obviously you're a serving police officer from the northern area. It's no issue. You can be called on duty. So
Yeah.
it was more the approval of the overtime payment, which was, that's just administrational. So it was just, "Yep, no trouble. In you come, mate. There's your statement. Here's my statement."
Yep.
And I mean, the beauty of that is it sort of cuts down the time on the call out anyway. But mate, you would have done that 3 or 4 times in Tennant
Oh,
Creek.
yeah, mate. I'd still remember, and each occasion, I think one of them I took 3 or 4 statements.
Yeah.
You'd actually just walk them in. I remember I'd just sit in your office, and you put me at one of the computers, and you just bring a witness in, and then when I'm finished with that one, there'd be people basically just grabbing witnesses and bring them down the station,
Mm.
just to hand them straight over to me, and I loved it. I was just sitting there in front of a computer typing away, but yeah, unfortunately though, I never got paid to come down and go to a court case down there. So you must have done really good files because
Yeah.
I never got called to give evidence.
No. No. She's a pretty tight old show. Yeah,
Because that's
pretty.
that's for anybody listening, that was one of the old things I used to do when you used to go and help out like Kalkaringi and all that. You used to make sure you were on the apprehension report as a witness because back in Kalkaringi in the day it was a 3-day, was it 3 or 2 day court.
2 day,
But
I think.
yeah, but you go out there on the day before, and you usually there was a bit of a party. The police had thrown a bit of a gig after court, and so you get to actually have a few drinks, out at Kalkaringi with the
Just
crew
a
out
bit of a socialise, yeah. You may
there.
as well capitalise on socialising while you're there for a legitimate court case. You may as well actually enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that's right. So,
But the best one of them I ever heard, there was a very major incident in Alice Springs. I wasn't involved in the job. I just happened to be in Alice when the court matter was being heard in the Supreme Court in Alice Springs. And a former Alice Springs CIB member who'd been involved in the initial response to this job 2 years earlier had left the police force and actually bought a pub down in New South Wales. And because this job was so huge, He'd been called back, and I think it was for the coronial or a major Supreme Court matter. He'd been called back, so summoned back to court to give evidence, but as a publican.
Oh,
So
right.
he's turned up back in Alice Springs, and the trip's basically, a lot of your costs are covered by the DPP to bring you back as a witness. So he got the opportunity to come back and have a bit of a reunion with all his old mates, and he was having a great time. I mean, obviously, he had serious work to do through the day. But yeah, at night time, it was like, oh, how good's this, mate? Paid trip back to Alice to catch up with the boys, and it's just a job that I had a lot to do with a couple of years ago, and we're finally getting a good result. So he was still invested in the matter itself, but
Yeah.
he'd very much moved on from the police force. He'd been called back to the NT as a publican to talk about his time as a detective senior constable in the Alice Springs CIB.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was far better than anything I ever did.
Yeah. Well, and like for people listening in, there's also I know, and we'll probably actually I don't did we mention it when we talk about extraditions, mate? Because the usually they'd always be very hospitable to the the cops from interstate. And there's I think, well, I can't tell too many stories, but I do remember Anthony Henry's telling one or two crazy stories when he had to go and extradite someone, and they got him on the piss. So yeah,
Oh yeah. Well, a mate of mine, Lenny Turner, tells a brilliant story about arriving in Echuca on the Murray River in
yeah,
Victoria. He was down there for an extradition for a matter out of Darwin, and he was down there. There would have been two down there. I know it was Lenny and one of his mates down from Darwin CIB to pick this fella up, and they said they got picked up at I think it was the airport in Echuca. They got picked up by the Victorian detectives. So this would be the early 2000s. And he said there was an esky in the back seat waiting for him. And they basically got in the car, got dropped off at their hotel with an esky full of booze. And they said, fellas, we're still busy at work, but come 5 o'clock, we'll knock off and we'll meet you at this pub here and we'll have dinner and that's going to be the show.
yeah,
And he said, Echuca is my favourite place in the whole world. He said, we turn up, they drop us off at our hotel room with a carton of beer. And away they went. So, yeah, no, he said it was bloody good. And then they had a good night. He said the overwhelming majority of the little I think they call it CIU in Victoria, they were all there.
yeah,
So he said they were very hospitable. Echuca CI, I think it was. They were, an excellent crew. So that was more the extradition stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, I'm just thinking, called on duty. I've mentioned a big one in Alice where me and two of my mates were having beers at the Rock Bar in the main street. All of a sudden, we were surrounded by about 200 angry armed youths.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's probably the only time I ever thought, oh, this could go real pear shaped here. Obviously, you keep your wits about you all the time, but this particular day, we were just outnumbered, and a crowd's bad. We've mentioned this before, but there's nothing worse than mob mentality. They work each other into a frenzy, especially youths. They don't really have the ability to control themselves, and they sort of one up each other. And there's also the anonymity that comes with being in a mob. So we were outnumbered, out weaponed, and the only thing we had to do there was hold our ground until we could retreat back inside the pub and roll the big shutters down, which unfortunately just about every business in Alice Springs has to have big. They're extremely strong shutters. They're like big roller doors that you just can't get through. So I remember pulling that. The bouncer pulled that down as we retreated back inside the pub, and all you could hear was the shutters just getting pummeled.
yeah.
That was a bit hairy.
Yeah, mate. It is actually I got another one. I was this is when I was helping Kenny Bradshaw. Big shout out to Kenny Bradshaw. But I was working in said, and we were going out the next day. But I had one of the vehicles, of course. We're going out because we always leave at about 2 in the morning or something, or midnight probably. Go out and do a roadblock, and anyway, so I just went down. It was, I don't know, about 8 o'clock at night, just to fuel up the vehicle before we headed out. And I was off duty because you take those cars with you wherever you go. And anyway, I was sitting in the BP, and of course, two of our regulars decided to, well, I suppose one guy, won't mention his name, and the female, she was his auntie. And anyway, he's started laying into her. Anyway, all right, come over here, sit down. Anyway, this guy, we knew him really, really well. And we knew the other one really well, and they're probably both as bad as each other. But anyway, this is a small statue kind of guy. And anyway, I've just said, sit down. stay there. And I've called the police. I said, and I'm still actually fueling up the car. I never laid a hand on him, but he sat down right next to me. And I said, you sit there. And he's complaining to me, going, yeah, but she said this. And I said, I know, mate, but you just can't go around hitting people. And he's still sitting there. And anyway, the police came down and arrested him, and he was completely compliant. Never had to lay a hand on him. And the other one got attended to by the hospital. Mind you, she's been in 1 or 500 fights, I think, over
Yeah.
the years, and so she wasn't too bad off. And not that he could probably inflict a lot of pain anyway. And I think you know who exactly I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And
Got a fair inkling.
and anyway, he's been arrested. But the funniest thing about that, I was he went to court the next day, and I said, I'll do my statement up and all that sort of thing. And anyway, he pled guilty, but apparently he's just gone in. His defense lawyer goes, oh, we can contest this, blah blah blah. And he goes, no. He goes, Ben said I was guilty. I was guilty. So
Guilty for that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he just pled guilty. You go, no, I trust Ben. I go, oh, jeez. And he was good. He was. We used to use him for a lot of intel and all that sort of thing. But
Yeah, you little rough diamond. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, he wasn't a diamond. He,
no,
he was just rough. He was all right. He had a kindness about him, but he certainly was capable of criminality.
oh,
I think
definitely, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Usually just break and enter was his normal thing for alcohol.
yeah,
He was an
and,
alcoholic.
and
Um,
just seeking out enough booze for
yeah,
him. Like, so he'd bust a whole window to get into a bloody bottle shop, and then just take like one bottle
that's
and
yeah.
leave.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
All he wanted to do was keep drinking. He's one of these people that you knew he had grog stashed away. That if you released him in the morning, if he took off like a bolt, out of the watch house when he was just staying there for protective custody, and if he was in a rush, you knew he had alcohol still somewhere, and you see him in a few hours.
yeah.
Um,
Just go back and have another snooze. Yeah, look,
that's
it's a tragic tale, but I mean,
yes,
it's just reality. So you've got to sort of have a humorous sort of outlook on it when you're there because you've got to deal with it all the time. So it just becomes, and it's funny, they become someone, you become someone to them who they sort of know and trust.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, you do,
yeah,
and we liked it. I mean, we ran into him all the time. It was. It was we probably run into him more than we do most of our friends. So,
yeah,
but
yeah. I
mate,
believe he popped up in every single piece of CCTV during a
oh,
major investigation,
yep,
just
yep, yeah,
wandering the
yeah,
streets. Yeah,
mate. When I was doing the that Old Street
yeah,
Operation Old Street, the murder, and Catherine and I had a review of the video footage. That was my most entertaining part because I had all the CCTV footage in Catherine, and you just see him pop up every now and again. It was like, "Where's Wally?"
yeah. But where's Zachy?
Yeah,
I won't say his last name, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
No, look, I do have another quick one. It was on duty, but it very easily could have been off duty because it had nothing to do with policing. And I've told you this one before. Look, as stated before, I'm the bloody Grim Reaper, and I've done CPR a lot of times. And me and my partner, this is early days in the car key days. We pulled up at the BP survey, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, refueled the vehicle. And, you always work as a team as the coppers. So my partner's outside fueling up, and I've just gone to line up because, there's always a few people there that time of day. It must have been the dry season, lots of caravans around. And anyway, I've walked in and there's probably, 3 or 4 people in front of me paying for fuel, and I've just got the fuel card waiting for him to finish filling up the ute. And there's an old fella just in front of me, and he turns around, just a friendly smile, and he just turns back around, and I think he said g'day. I just said g'day back, and I'm just standing in the line waiting. Anyway, it wouldn't have been 30 seconds later, that same fella just fell straight back onto me, and really hard. Like he basically just completely lost the ability to stand up and flopped straight back on me and then smacked into the ground. I mean, I sort of stopped his fall, and then held his head, and I'm just talking, going, mate, you're right. And I looked, and I could see that his eyes were fixed.
yeah,
And he wasn't breathing. I could tell straight away that he wasn't breathing. And I thought, bloody hell, this bloke's just died and fallen on me, which is what happened.
yeah,
Anyway, so I've just got on the radio and I've just gone, yeah, I think we're 481 or whatever, 481 urgent, get an ambulance at BP server. And they're like, oh, yeah, we haven't got you off the job. I said, no, we're not at a job. We're bloody refueling. And I told him what's happened.
yeah,
Anyway, I roll into CPR and my partner's heard this over the radio and he's like, Barb, what? And he's run inside and he's got me on the ground and there's a bit of a crowd sort of stunned. Like, people just freeze. They're like, what the
yeah,
hell? And I didn't really ask for any help because I've just gone straight into CPR on this guy. And my partner came in. He's like, "Oh shit, what happened?" I said, "Mate, he's just fallen on me. Like he just fell over. I think he's had a massive heart attack." He's like, "Yeah, righto, okay, here's what it is." So he's sort of telling people, "Just come on, just move back." And I think they shut the door to the the sliding door at the front of the BPs.
Yep.
They've
Yep.
turned that so it won't open, and they've just asked everyone inside to stand back. Anyway, we're going away on this bloke, and it would have been not long. Like Catherine's pretty small. I remember the Ambos were pretty quick, and they've turned up. We've opened the door for them, but by this stage, the wife of this old fella, she's sitting in the passenger seat of their car out the front. So they've got a 4-wheel drive and a towing a caravan. They've just refueled. She's in the car. She's going, "What's going on?" She's come to sort of see. And I think she must have got a glimpse through the window and seen us inside doing CPR on her husband. So she's obviously then quite hysterical. But yeah, we were into it. And, anyway, the Ambos did their thing and we helped them. We just keep doing CPR. They put all kinds of, monitors and things like that on the patient. They were happy with our CPR, so we keep doing that. They start injecting with adrenaline and different drugs to try and get him back. Anyway, they're pretty certain there's no way. He's had basically a massive occlusion, which is just a catastrophic heart attack.
Yep.
So we put him on the gurney, continued CPR out into the ambulance, and the ambulance drove off, red and blues going, but turned the red and blues off as soon as it got around the corner because there was no point. And from
Yep.
memory, he was taken straight to the hospital. And we went up, and I think we actually took that coronial on, but it was very quickly resolved. He had a doctor, I think he was from Victoria from memory. He had a
All right.
doctor down in Melbourne who just signed him off. He said, "Yeah, look, he's got fairly bad heart disease and things like that." So it never became much of an investigation, but obviously because we were there, it became our job. Now, the reason I mentioned that one is, yeah, sure, we were on duty, but that could happen to anyone, anytime, and it was just the ability to respond to it. And I would like just the little bit of input would be, don't be afraid to intervene, especially in first aid matters. If you're acting in good faith and you're not acting beyond your knowledge ability, like if you've got a first aid qualification or you've got a CPR qualification or you've just done one once and you know how to do this stuff, don't be afraid to slip in and help out.
Yep.
It's just it will make you feel good about yourself if you've done your best, even if they don't survive. It's like they were going to die regardless of your input, but the fact that you've ripped in there. I mean, I get first responders and military types would get this, but I just mean to any person. There's a real bit of a culture in society around the world of don't get involved in anyone else's business. Well, it's just, someone else is in crisis and they just need help. I'm not saying intervene in a bloody active shooter and get yourself killed, but I'm saying
Yeah.
if there's a first aid matter and you can assist, then the assistance is always appreciated. The only thing I would say is just do what you're told by first responders, because quite often people sort of get a bit excited and carry on. It's like just be of assistance. Don't be don't
Only
be
buggers.
an embuggerance. I
Yeah.
was trying to think of a better word, but anyway, um, yeah. So yeah, don't be afraid to rip in there and help. And quite often when I teach first aid now, and when the ambos and one of the lead trainer for us is an active paramedic in Armidale, and she says, and I knew this anyway, but if people turn up, if the ambos turn up and they can see bystanders performing effective CPR, they'll leave you in place. They'll get you to keep doing that if you're willing and able. And because that frees them up to do other things. Like they're going to start administering drugs, they're going to be monitoring for different things. They might be applying an AED. So yeah, there's definitely don't feel bad about getting involved. In Australia, if you're acting in good faith and you're not going beyond your bounds, don't start performing surgery on them. But certainly, if you're doing CPR, you're not going to be liable. You can't be sued for anything. You're acting in good faith to save another person. So there's no legal ramifications for your actions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yep. Mate, exactly. You brought me onto something else and something we'll talk about later on, I think, especially when we talk about complaints against police and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to touch on policy and procedure sometime. But I've always said as long as you can justify exactly what you do and you do it in good faith, usually, you'll be completely fine. So
Yeah, it's the old reasonableness test.
it
Were
is
your actions reasonable? And I used to
reasonable
like it. It
person
was a pretty
similarly
basic thing.
circumstanced.
Yeah, a reasonable person or an ordinary person similarly
Yes,
circumstanced.
that's right.
It's an ordinary person test.
Yes.
Would an ordinary person in the same circumstances find your actions reasonable? Well, if
Yep.
someone's just fallen over in front of you and you start performing CPR, that to me is extremely reasonable.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly right, mate. Mate, I've just got another quick one before we finish off. Actually, I've got quite a few, but I've mentioned the one where we had that car flip, and I was with my ex-wife in the car. I was actually just driving the car back, but I was only on duty driving that car back. But and then I've spent another 5 hours on the side of the road, basically getting her attended to and a car towed. I've already told that story, but I've got another one. I was up in Darwin and I had to go up there for training. I can't remember exactly what for, but a lot of the time we used to drive in to get the car serviced as well because it was cheaper getting it serviced up in Darwin. It saved Airwing flying all the way out there. And anyway, so and of course when you're in Darwin, that police car is yours. I mean, it's your station car, so you drive it around everywhere. And I was off duty, and I was just coming out of the airport. I'd dropped something off at Airwing. Again, personal thing to get flown out. And anyway, I just come out and I've come across a car crash, just a simple one. However, because I'm in a police car, I'm in plain clothes, but I get waved over. And anyway, so yeah, there I am. I just parked the police car on the side of the road. I'm off duty, but I actually take all the details down and make sure it's logged in the system and get it all taken care of. And but it's just one of those things. I was off duty, and I saw the accident. I'm going, oh geez, and they obviously need, and it's just quicker. It takes the load off the poor old Darwin to go. It's just a simple thing where you got to make sure all the details, and so there's no problems when it goes to the insurance companies and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's when you're a police officer. Once you, like you said before, Damo, you've once you've been sworn in, there's a responsibility on and off duty to be able to carry out that sort of work. So
Yeah.
it's
But I think I like to reiterate before we cut this away. I know we've told some stories, some funny, some serious, whatever else. If you are off duty, and this is to the coppers, if you're
yep,
off duty and you see something that, remember when you're on duty, you've got a vehicle, you've got a radio, you've got an accoutrement belt with up to and including lethal force on it, options on it. The biggest thing I'd say is you've got that radio to go, bloody hell, back up.
yep,
Um, just never overstep your bounds. You can put yourself in a very dangerous situation by being in plain clothes. Like, if you that job with the knife wielding woman in Tennant Creek, we were both fairly experienced members. We'd had a lot of dealings with Aboriginal people. We kind of we very quickly, independently, but we both were on the same page, did a very dynamic risk assessment and made the decision that we could deal with this.
yep,
Um, if that had been a large man, quite strong with and more aggressive, then it may have been that we would have just got people back from him and
yeah,
just tried to communicate. But the big thing you got to remember is that we've got no ability to inflict any harm on him in order to defend ourselves. If he's a very motivated person coming at us with a knife, we're in a bit of trouble. That's as bad as it gets. You're being faced with lethal force, and you've got absolutely nothing you can do back. So while we've spoken about some funny stories, I think we're not encouraging people to go out looking on your days off. Just enjoy your days off. Like, don't go looking for
yeah,
work, for God's sake. But yeah, definitely. If you're in a situation and you can be of any assistance, yeah, sure. But I'll reinforce it again. If you're out on the booze with your crew, you're in your young, if you're a junior copper or even senior copper, leave your goddamn Freddy at home. If you see a major incident or something like that, and you've had a fair few to drink, and maybe get on 000 and call in, and you're certainly a very good complainant because you know how to describe things and you know how to give the information that police will need. But don't put yourselves, don't lose your life off duty for
no.
something that
No, mate, that's a very good point, Damo, and you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head there. We did actually a risk assessment that day together. But in our own minds, and we both basically came to the same conclusion that we could resolve this, with minimal force and being able to take it down with putting nobody else and ourselves at risk. So,
Yeah. And I
um,
mean, realistically, the amount of force we used there was very minimal. I think from memory, either me, I can't remember, one of us snatched the knife out of her hand pretty well by the handle. Like, she was holding it enough. She was small enough that we could reach the handle. And I
yep,
remember we just quickly snatched it and we got it out of her hands.
yep,
While the other person basically just pulled it to the ground. So she wasn't injured at all.
no,
And then we just held it down, and she certainly wasn't resisting. So there was no need to do anything else. We basically just held her down and just told her, calm down, and that was the end of that. So
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was we could get control of that knife almost immediately, and we knew we could overpower her with strength, if if required, and we could get in to grab a hold of it without out
yeah,
basically getting stabbed, and that was that was part of the thing. But yeah, you're dead right, Doma. You got to make sure that you do a risk assessment, and like you said, if it had been a 6'4", Hulk, we would have been backing away, going, everybody get back,
yeah,
and looking to get behind some cover. Even with I've had guys with a machete, and and they're walking towards you, and I put the car between us and them, or and all that sort of. You always look to protect yourself, not just go out and pull your gun out straight away. But especially if nobody else is at risk, you try and calm the situation by de-escalating their behaviour. So
yeah,
it's
definitely.
yeah. So, but anyway, mate, I think that might be. We're definitely at our time limit, and we've probably
Yeah,
got plenty more stories to tell. I can think of a couple, but
yeah, God, off duty, eh? Yeah,
but Dan, I think that probably answers your question, mate.
yeah. To,
Um,
to answer it really briefly, yes, mate, plenty of times.
but again, everybody, get in contact. Keep the keep the messages coming through. We do love it, and yeah. So but yeah, and thanks for all your feedback, and we're ever encroaching. We're over 70,000 downloads. So thanks everybody for listening.
Absolutely. We'll see you next week.
All right, see ya.